black and white framework of American imperialism, but for some reason they never understand American imperialism as like the bad guy, because there's always some reason as to why it's actually necessary and good. And that's the craziest part about this conversation, is that like American imperialism is bad, but also it's actually not bad. It's kind of necessary in this circumstance. Like, come on, let's do a little bit of it this time, okay?
With Ukraine, Russia has started moving some troops away from the border, a tentative sign that Moscow could be backing down from invading Ukraine. But a U.S.
because they felt Russian imperialism firsthand. You think some fucking dude who's hucking corn in Iowa experienced Russian imperialism firsthand? What the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, dude, every person that's saying Ukraine needs to be in NATO in my chat is actually literally in Kiev right now. Shut the fuck up, dude. No, Eastern Europeans, I know, but that's not true. I'm mostly talking to a predominantly American audience, okay? So shut the fuck up. Or maximum, or at most, I'm talking to fucking Ukrainian expats, Ukrainians that are now living in diaspora, Ukrainians that are now living in fucking Canada and America, who say the most psychotic shit as we have historically fucking seen. Because I'm sorry to all the fucking GG, to all the Ukrainians that are living in Canada and all the Ukrainians that are living in America, maybe not America, but definitely in Canada, okay? Like, you guys have the same kind of fucking reactionary brain rot that Turkish people living in America have. You guys have the exact same fucking kind of brain rot that Turkish people living in Germany have. They're hyper reactionary. They're really fucking agitated for war. They're really goddamn excited for it. Okay? That doesn't mean that there aren't anyone from Kiev, by the way. I mean, I'm sure there's like 34 Ukrainians currently, so. But the reality is that it's the same energy as like, oh, I'm a Venezuelan living in Miami, and I think America needs to immediately invade Venezuela. I'm a Cuban living in Miami, and we need to drone strike the Cuban government. That's a wild claim, hyper overgeneralized. I mean, dude, first of all, there are Ukrainians living in America, and even Ukrainians living in fucking Ukraine that agree with me as well. So, you know, there's that. As well, but I'm not using those individuals as like as a talking point to hold up against the rest of the people.
This official says some of those forces have actually moved into possible attack positions, and the government has warned Russia could mobilize as soon as this week. Laura Podesta is following this story for us. Laura, good morning.
Good morning. Well, what you mentioned, that is some positive news, but we are cautiously optimistic because we're hearing from U.S. military officials that over the last few days, a small number of Russian ground units have been moving out of the larger assembly areas and taking up positions closer to the Ukrainian border at what could be departure points if Putin launched an invasion.
Paratroopers with the 82nd Airborne Division left Fort Bragg on Monday, headed to Poland as the U.S. continues building up its troop presence in Eastern Europe.
I'm hoping to achieve peace. At the end of the day, that's what we want, peace.
CBS News has learned U.S. officials believe Vladimir Putin could invade Ukraine by week's end. But
Ukraine being the wrong to try and take back Donetsk and Luhansk? I think there are better methods of diplomatically creating an autonomous buffer zone rather than doing that.
But the White House is hopeful for a diplomatic solution.
The path for diplomacy remains available if Russia chooses to engage constructively.
Russia wants to keep Ukraine from joining NATO and for foreign nations to pull their military support out of Eastern Europe. Putin seemed open to allowing more time.
I'm a Ukrainian who lives in Canada. My mom went to Ukraine to visit friends, even though I mentioned the Russia-Ukraine thing. So I hope Hassan can maintain peace between Russia and Ukraine through this diplomatic nightly activities. I'm calling it now. Russia will invade tomorrow. Yeah, totally, dude. They're sitting 10 seats apart, usually, with Western forces because they apparently refuse to get tested. They don't want to give their DNA to Russians for some weird reason. So, like, that's the reason why the French president, Emmanuel Macron, had to sit on that fat table, too.
Time for diplomacy in a televised meeting with his foreign minister. Despite roughly 130,000 Russian troops surrounding Ukraine, it appears to be business as usual on the streets of Kyiv. But Ukrainians in the U.S. are worried for their families back home.
People in Ukraine are fearful.
Igor Markov lives in California. He says the uncertainty is difficult as he thinks about his aunt and uncle.
It's just so strange because, like, there's literally people living in Ukraine. There are actual journalists stationed in Ukraine. There are journalists stationed in Moscow. They have the capacity to put a fucking microphone in the mouth of someone also living there. And they have before. And when they do actually have someone like that, they say, listen, we live with fucking Russian aggression on a daily basis. And that's true. That's Lavrov, the foreign affairs minister of Russia. It's because Putin is paranoid about COVID, actually. I was talking about the Macron thing, but that makes sense. The foreign affairs minister of Russia, it's because Putin is paranoid about COVID. Yeah. Anyway, it's a completely reasonable thing to be upset and fearful of the gigantic fucking mega power in comparison to Ukraine's power, obviously, that is in your backyard, that historically has controlled your country, okay? It's a completely understandable fear to have, except, you know, life goes on. And escalation by Western agitators would make it significantly worse for life to go on, okay? You can cut as much tape as you fucking want of grandmas holding up Kalashnikovs, okay? Or AR-15. Suspiciously, the AR platform is making a big, making a big comeback in Ukraine for some interesting reason. You know, that's the lethal aid that they got. Okay, you can fucking show that shit nonstop, but ultimately that will crater an entire fucking country. Okay, these people just want a better economy, and the best way to do that for Ukraine, just like every other fucking country, is to deal with their own regional leaders, rather than going in and turning their country into a fucking military base for Western interests and getting IMF loans that destroy their country's economy further. Okay? I don't care if you have like fucking Ukrainian, you sound like a centrist at this point. Yeah, I mean, if you think so, but foreign policy, and it might shock you, is not black and white. Okay? It's very difficult to get a fucking beat on foreign policy, or even history in general is not black and white. Normative stances on history are really silly, except for some well-established exceptions in the form of chattel slavery and Nazi Germany, okay? That's it. Chattel slavery, the Confederacy, Nazi Germany. Those are the instances where you have like normative declarations. Most historians agree on such normative declarations. However, other than that, outside of that, you're supposed to look at it. You're supposed to look at what was going on and look at either side and their fucking personal interests in the matter.
We're safe right now, but we don't know what will happen in 3-4 days. I very much hope that they will be safe.
The U.S. has temporarily closed its embassy in Kyiv and moved staff to Lviv, a city in western Ukraine.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is leaving Washington this.
History is not so simple. Also, Hassan, Vietnam, Iran, Korea, Ukraine, all the same. I mean, that is not the end-all, be-all of my analysis on Vietnam, Iran, Korea, Ukraine, I think, right? But they are under the same umbrella of American imperialism. So, yes, Western imperialism, American interests being protected. So, letting you know.
This morning for trips to Belgium, Poland, and Lithuania. Lana, he's expected to consult with NATO leaders about Russia's buildup and also meet with American troops.
Laura, on Russian TV.
So Russia was never going to invade, but what was the harm with lethal aid? What was the harm with lethal aid? Do we not, like, that's the most Ameri-brained bullshit I've ever seen. I can't even say that that's like Westoid brain. That's just straight up American brain. Dog, what the fuck are you talking about? When has more guns been a good thing? Especially when some of those guns are literally being armed by being given off to actual fucking Nazis that are training the citizens. What do you think lethal aid does, bro? You think fucking lethal aid is just offering kisses? It's a gun that gives you kisses when you shoot it?
A meeting between Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Vladimir Putin suggested that Moscow would seek further negotiations with the West. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was interesting. They put their negotiations at this large table in the Kremlin on camera for the world to see. And during the discussion, which was in Russian, they spoke about next steps and how diplomatic talks with NATO countries should continue. We've heard from U.S. politicians, one who said that Putin is an egomaniac and may not want to remove troops from the Ukrainian border.
Do we just then let Russia do what the fuck they want? Like, what the fuck? First of all, what are you talking about? Russia was not going to invade Ukraine. And I was fucking right. And even in a moment where, like, we're supposed to be, like, seeing that I was right and saying, okay, maybe I was a little fucking aggro. Maybe I should re-examine the reasons as to why I was so fucking aggro. You literally are still saying, like, we're supposed to fucking stop Russia from invading Ukraine. We're watching a news report about Russia moving troops back. And you're still like, no, they're gonna invade regardless.
Border because it looks like he would be backing down. This conversation, Lana, was a way for his foreign minister to perhaps take.
People were saying Russia is not going to invade Crimea, but it happened. I never said that. But since Crimea's invasion, okay, annexation, you have to recognize that it's not the same as Kiev. Very different. Majority Russian population. Like, overwhelming majority of the population is Russian. There was a referendum that took place, which was, you know, not the greatest referendum. Certainly a lot of corruption there. But not only did that happen, where 82% said that they were on board with the Russian annexation and joining Russia, okay? But ultimately, there were Western sources. Not the greatest referendum, lol. I mean, I'm fucking admitting it. What do you want from me? What do you want? Like, do you want me to fucking lie? Azov and right sector exists, but the real weight in Ukraine are greatly exaggerated. Don't say that the Nazi will get the guns. No, the problem is, historically, America has always greatly exaggerated the fucking small reactionary fucking forces, beefed them up, given them training, used them as a weapon against, used them as a destabilizing force historically. And that's precisely what they're doing with Azov and Azov-like people, the hooligans, okay? And they did this with the Mujahideen. And before you know it, you're like, well, what the fuck? These guys only got like 2% of the vote in Ukraine last year. Why are we now at a position where, like, they're, you know, why are they getting so much prominence? Why are they all of a sudden, you know, why are their sympathizers meeting with John McCain? Why are their leaders meeting with fucking Amy Klobuchar and John McCain? If they're such a tiny, insignificant group, then why the fuck do they get so much leeway and so much fucking, you know, so much help, direct support, CIA training from the American government? I don't know what to tell you. Like, if you don't recognize that this is very much a part of American, this is how America does statecraft, okay? This is how America does espionage, statecraft, and American imperialism. And they're doing it again, and you're saying, well, it's not that big of a deal. Like, I mean, Russia is way more scary than the Nazis here in Ukraine. Okay, well, yeah, Russia does have Nazis. Russia also has Chechen militias, and they're even worse than the Nazis, if we're being real, okay? Holy shit. Or right up there with the Nazis. But we're not fucking arming them. We're not training them. We're not actually fucking giving them guns and more legitimacy. We, on the other hand, are doing that for Azov Battalion. What did you just say? Chechens murdered thousands of children in Koble in the 90s. I mean, dude, Chechens are fucking... You should not fuck with them. That's all I'm saying, okay? Anyway.
Take some of the blame, because during the discussion, Lavrov put it out there that while diplomatic talks should continue and be increased, it was interesting that in this highly choreographed conversation, it was not Putin who was suggesting that diplomacy is the way to go.
Very, very curious about that. All right, Laura, thank you.
Thanks.
We are willing to sell arms to Saudi Arabia for them to genocide in Yemen, and homies are really out here asking what's wrong with lethal aid. See also Central America, South America, and Israel. Exactly. Now the Nazis can return to their communities and proliferate their profound views instead of dying on the front lines. It's over already. They got the fucking training. They got the guns, and they're the ones who are literally saying, like, we're going to arm you.